So I'd like to transition to Palestine now before we wrap up. I appreciate you giving us all this time. Um, so we're in Tampa. Obviously, you're very popular with the Muslim community now and the Palestinian community. You probably have been for years, but I think after October 7th, with all your coverage on Palestine and your analysis, which has been great, I think you've become quite the celebrity in our community. And so we went, for the viewers who don't know, we took you to a couple restaurants, and random people would come up and say, "Hey, you're Scott Ritter." They didn't even see you; they just heard you talking to us, and they're like, "I recognize that voice," and they want to take a picture with you. And so you're really appreciated and respected, I think, in this community of people that want to see Palestinians gain their rights, and that's because of your analysis. That's because of you getting on Judge Napolitano and other YouTube channels to discuss the Palestine issue. So I want to talk to you about October 7th specifically. I produced a video for Propaganda and Co. that went viral that tried to bring the conversation back to what actually happened, because there was, the atrocity propaganda. Afterwards, we were all talking about what didn't happen. Okay, these atrocity propaganda lies didn't happen, the beheaded babies, et cetera, et cetera. So we wanted to bring the conversation back to what actually happened. And we sourced a lot of that information from the article that you wrote, breaking down the attack on October 7th tactically. Now, because I don't want to get demonetized or deplatformed, let's just talk about it from a tactical perspective. October 7th, resistance fighters in Gaza, who we'll refer to them instead of using their actual name, but the resistance fighters in Gaza carried out some sort of attack on October 7th. From a military tactical perspective, can you share with us what you wrote in the article?
Sure, but it's more than just a military tactical. It was a strategic operation.
Can you explain the difference?
Yeah, I will. But I just want everybody who's listening to close your eyes for a second and imagine the world on October 6th. Ask yourself the question of, well, what was the status of Palestinian statehood? And I think almost everybody would agree that there was no movement at all on Palestinian statehood. What was happening in the world, there's people were talking about a India Middle East economic corridor linking India through United Arab Emirates, through Saudi Arabia, through Jordan, into Israel, and from the port of Haifa onto Greece and Europe. And just imagine, just listen to what I said. A economic corridor linking the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. The world was talking about integrating Israel into a greater economic cooperation scheme. That's what they were talking about. When Benjamin Netanyahu spoke at the United Nations General Assembly, the General Assembly debate in September of last year, he showed a map talking about this corridor. On that map, he had a depiction of the state of Israel. Nowhere in there was a Palestinian state. Nobody was talking about a Palestinian state. And that's the point I'm trying to make. On October 6th, a Palestinian state wasn't even in the imagination of anybody, realistically speaking. After October 7th, that's all people are talking about. That's the strategic implication of what happened there. That's the shift. And you have to look at it. So now, how did that shift occur? Now we come down to the nuts and bolts of it. In order for that to happen, whoever planned this operation needed to create the conditions to change global opinion. How do you change global? Let's reverse engineer it. Instead of starting at the small level, let's bring it in from the big picture. So now we're talking Palestinian statehood is on the agenda. The world's talking about that. But to make that happen, the world has to agree that there is a need for a Palestinian state. But if the world opinion prior to that on October 6th wasn't there, was siding with Israel or was just ignoring it, how do you get that? You have to generate something that can trigger change on a global scale. And in order to do that, you have to change the dynamic that is involved in how the world views Israel. So you're going to have to get Israel to do something that changes global opinion about Israel. So the thing you want Israel to do is that which Israel is inclined to do. through their doctrine. And we know this because of the experience of 2006 in Lebanon, when Israel fought a 33-day war with Hezbollah to a standstill, and was so angry and frustrated that they carried out a policy of collective punishment on the Lebanese population of West Beirut. I think it's a suburb, the Dahiwa suburb. I'm sure I'm saying that word wrong, but the people know what I'm talking about. Indiscriminate bombing, slaughtering of civilians, not for a military objective, but to punish the civilians for supporting Hezbollah. This was now official Israeli doctrine. The Air Force bragged about this mowing the grass thing. So how do you get Israel to do this? You have to create an incident that provokes Israel into carrying out these literal war crimes. So now what does that entail? It's not firing rockets. The resistance fires rockets all the time. It doesn't precipitate that. It doesn't even have to be it can't be an act of terrorism, because random acts of terrorism have occurred over time that don't necessarily precipitate. It has to be a massive action that shocks the sensibility of Israel. A raid. See, a raid is a unique military operation. It involves leaving a prepared defensive position, advancing into enemy territory to carry out a variety of objectives, and then to withdraw back to prepared defensive positions. Oftentimes, the raid is designed to lure the enemy in pursuit so they can be ambushed. So now, that's exactly what Hamas did. Now, to do that, Hamas needed to do a couple things. First of all, the Israelis had near perfect intelligence coverage of Gaza. They had surveillance everywhere. So Hamas, if they're going to lure the Israelis into an ambush situation, they have to create a scenario where the Israelis don't have perfect intelligence. So your attack, your raid, has to neutralize the Israeli intelligence capacity. This included the array of sensors along the border, the cameras that looked in there, the radio intercept capabilities, human intelligence monitoring. All of these things became targets that had to be attacked by Hezbollah and neutralized. They had to embarrass the Israelis, because it couldn't just be an attack that could be repulsed. They had to attack on a scope and scale that inflicted casualties on the Israelis. And so it had to be a raid that had to have an element of violence attached to it, violence on contact with the enemy, to assault through, to carry out. And then the most important part was to seize hostages, prisoners, to capture prisoners in sufficient quantity that Israel couldn't ignore it, and bring them back to Gaza and bed them down and force Israel to come after them, compel Israel to come into Gaza. So the raid takes place. They blind Israel. They take out all of the cameras. They deafen Israel, blow up all the repeating stations. They attack the Human Intelligence Center and got all the computers with all the names of all the collaborators. Look what happened on October 8th. Bodies started appearing throughout Gaza. Bodies of the collaborators. The Israelis were made totally blind. So now as they come into Gaza, they're coming in a uncontrolled fashion. They're coming in groping their way through, which gives the advantage again to Hamas to attack them where they can. They force the Israelis to carry out not targeted missions, but sweeping broad bombardments to do what Israel was preconditioned to do, collective punishment of the Palestinian people. And as they did this, world opinion began to turn. And as the war extended, because Hamas was planning a long-term campaign, the resistance was planning a long-term campaign, the longer this campaign goes on, the more atrocities are committed by the Israelis, and the more the world begins to turn. This was perhaps the most well-planned strategic military operation in modern history. And it has achieved every objective that it sought out to achieve. The resistance was never going to defeat Israel in a stand-up fight. They're not designed to do that. Israel set the condition of victory of being the total defeat of Hamas. 6 months in, Hamas operates everywhere in Gaza. Everywhere in Gaza. Northern Gaza, central Gaza, southern Gaza, everywhere. Israel controls nothing. Controlling the surface of Gaza is nothing, because Hamas built the battleground underground, in the tunnels. The most optimistic assessment put out there is that Hamas has lost 20% of their tunnels. They still have 80% of their tunnel network there. The most pessimistic estimate of Hamas losses is they've lost 35% of their combat power. The other estimate shows that they may have lost only 10% of the combat power, but the bottom line is Hamas has not been eradicated as a combat force. It's still there, able to continue the resistance. Politically, they are more powerful today than they've ever been, because, again, I just state, on October 6th, what was the Palestinian Liberation Authority doing? What was the PLA doing for Palestinian statehood? Nothing. What was Fatah doing for Palestinian statehood? Nothing. On October 7th, the only entity doing something for Palestinian statehood was the Gaza-based resistance. And today they're recognized by virtually every Palestinian out there as the only one that's standing up for Palestinian statehood. They're more empowered politically than they have ever been. So they fought the Israelis to a standstill on the ground. They've expanded their prestige and viability politically. And the world is turning on Israel to the point where right now everybody, even the United States, agrees that the only solution is one that talks about the creation of a Palestinian state. This is a strategic victory on the part of the resistance of Gaza, and it has to be viewed that way. It's hard to celebrate this because of the death and suffering that's taken place. We were talking over 30,000 innocent women and children, 18,000 children. These are mind-boggling numbers. But during World War II, the United States and the Allies launched a campaign to liberate France. It began in Normandy, the Normandy campaign. And Charles de Gaulle was brought in and briefed by the Allied commanders about the need to bombard the Norman countryside. And he was told that the Allies would kill between 80 and 120,000 French civilians to liberate Normandy. That the Allies would kill between 80 and 120,000. The actual number turned out to be 60,000. To liberate Normandy, we killed 60,000 French civilians. Because of that number, Charles de Gaulle never attended a D-Day anniversary celebration because he couldn't celebrate something that cost France so much. But he also realized that the only way France was going to be liberated from Nazi occupation was for an operation to take place, knowing that that operation was going to result in so many dead French civilians. I believe that the resistance in Gaza understood what was going to happen, understood that the only way you were going to change international opinion was by compelling the Israelis to do something that equates to genocide, and indeed has been called genocide by the International Court of Justice in most nations around the world. And that these 30,000 dead should be considered 30,000 martyrs, 30,000 heroes, 30,000 patriots who shed their blood, gave their lives for the cause of a Palestinian state. Because there wouldn't be a Palestinian state without their sacrifice. There can't be a Palestinian state without their sacrifice. And if you view it in that way, I think it helps you not go insane. Because if you don't put a value to their sacrifice, if you don't give meaning to their death, then you just see images of dead children and dead women and dead men, and you'll go insane. You'll lose your mind. But if you view them as this heroic sacrifice for a cause, the Sinwar, the head of the resistance political organization, wrote a book, Thorn Incarnation, and he talks about his experience growing up in Gaza. And one thing you come across is, he speaks about generations of Palestinians who knew only the camps. Only the camps, that's all they knew. Children of the camps. The generation of Palestinian youth today were born in the camps. And October 6th, their only future was to die in the camps. Maybe after living a certain life, maybe dying on an Israeli bomb, but they were going to die prisoners in the camps under Israeli occupation. That was their fate. And if they ever got married and had children, that was the fate of their children. That was the fate of their parents. That was the fate of their grandparents. They were all children of the camps. Because of the sacrifice of these Gazans today, there's a chance that the next generation of Palestinian children won't be children of the camps, but they'll be children of a free Palestinian state. But that could only happen because of the sacrifice that was made by these 30,000 courageous Gazan Palestinian civilians.
This video is sponsored by you. That's because we don't have any sponsors. All we have are supporters like yourself. So please consider making a contribution to our channel. You can give to us via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description of this video. That way, we can continue to fly guests like Scott Ritter to our studio for an insightful podcast from which we can all benefit, like the one you're watching right now. So please consider making a contribution. Thank you for your support.
Trust nothing. No